In the winter of 1959, a group of 10 young Soviet students set out on a hiking expedition deep into the Ural Mountains. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an experienced radio engineering student from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, the team aimed to reach Otorten, a remote peak in northern Sverdlovsk Oblast. This wasn't an amateur outing. These were seasoned hikers, most of them in their early 20s, well-trained in navigating harsh Siberian terrain. The Soviet Union at the time was a land defined by secrecy, structure, and control. But in the cold wilderness of the Urals, none of that mattered. Nature reigned supreme. The hikers chose a route classified as Grade 3, the most difficult level, requiring serious endurance and skill. Still, with their background and preparation, the journey was seen as challenging but entirely achievable. The Ural Mountains themselves are rugged and steeped in local legend. The area where the group planned to travel, near a peak ominously named Koletsyakhl by the indigenous Mansi people, translates to Mountain of the Dead. But for Igor Dyatlov and his team, it was just another adventure, one that would earn them a high-level hiking certification and valuable experience. None of them knew that this trip would become one of Russia's most enduring and terrifying mysteries. The journey began on January 23, 1959, when 10 hikers boarded a train from Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a remote peak in the Ural Mountains, known more for its remoteness than for its difficulty. The group was young, energetic, and optimistic. They documented their journey in diaries and photographs, smiling faces, jokes, and journal entries filled with excitement. On January 28th, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, fell ill with joint pain and reluctantly turned back. He had no idea he would be the only one to survive. The remaining 9 pressed forward through worsening weather and harsh conditions. Snowstorms, sub-zero temperatures, and difficult terrain slowed their progress. By February 1st, the group had deviated slightly from their planned route due to deteriorating weather. That night, they made their final camp on the slopes of Koletsyakhl, a name that chillingly translates from the local Mansi language as Mountain of the Dead. When the group failed to return by their scheduled date, relatives grew concerned, and a search operation was launched. On February 26th, rescuers discovered the hikers' tent, but what they found sparked more questions than answers. The tent was half collapsed and slashed open from the inside, as if the group had fled in panic. Strangely, warm clothing and boots were left behind. The first bodies were found barefoot and barely dressed, lying in the snow not far from the tent. 2 were huddled under a cedar tree, as if trying to build a fire. 3 more were found between the tree and the tent, appearing to have died while trying to return. It wasn't until 2 months later that the remaining 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine. These hikers had massive internal injuries, broken ribs, crushed skulls, but with no visible signs of struggle. One woman was missing her tongue and eyes. Another had facial trauma that defied explanation. There were no signs of another party, no evidence of foul play, just the eerie silence of the frozen wilderness. One of the earliest and most widely accepted explanations is the avalanche theory. According to this idea, the group may have triggered a small but deadly snowslide that forced them to flee their tent in the middle of the night. The pros are fairly straightforward. The hikers set up camp on a slope, and the weather conditions were rough. A sudden shift in the snowpack could have triggered panic. Slashing their way out of the tent could make sense if the entrance was blocked. But the problems with this theory are significant. The tent remained partially standing, and investigators noted that it wasn't buried by snow. More importantly, the injuries suffered, especially crushed ribs and skulls, didn't align with typical avalanche trauma. And if an avalanche had hit, why were some of the bodies found more than 70 meters away, almost untouched? Another chilling theory suggests that the hikers were caught in the middle of secret Soviet military tests. Supporting this idea are several strange facts. Some of the clothing contained traces of radiation, and nearby hikers reported seeing glowing orange spheres in the sky on the night of the incident. The Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War, was known for its secrecy and intense weapons development. Some believe the group may have stumbled into a classified zone, or worse, been used for experimentation. There's even speculation about parachute mines or sonic weapons being tested in the area. But there's no direct evidence. No official records of weapons tests in the area were ever released. And while the radiation levels were above normal, they weren't high enough to prove exposure to a nuclear device. Still, the Soviet government's quick and quiet closure of the investigation only fuels suspicion. Early in the investigation, suspicion briefly fell on the Mansi people, the indigenous group native to the region. Some believed the hikers had trespassed on sacred land and been punished. But this theory quickly fell apart. The Mansi were known to be peaceful and cooperative. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints around the tent except those of the hikers themselves, and nothing was stolen. Investigators found no motive or evidence that could tie the Mansi to the deaths. In the end, this theory was dismissed as both culturally insensitive and factually unsupported. A more scientific explanation lies in the effects of hypothermia. When the body temperature drops too low, the brain can become disoriented. Victims may suffer from what's called paradoxical undressing, a sensation of burning heat that causes them to remove their clothes in freezing conditions. This could explain why some hikers were found nearly naked in the snow and why they fled the tent without shoes or gear. It's a known phenomenon in cold weather deaths. However, the theory doesn't account. Then there are the more speculative theories, often dismissed by experts but still widely discussed. Some suggest a ball lightning event or infrasound, a low-frequency sound caused by wind and mountains that triggered panic and hallucinations. Others go further, pointing to a UFO encounter or even an attack by a cryptid like the Russian equivalent of Bigfoot, often referred to as a Yeti. These ideas may sound far-fetched, but they've kept the mystery alive in pop culture. Documentaries, books, and films continue to explore these possibilities, not because they're provable, but because the lack of hard answers leaves room for imagination. One of the most persistent theories surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident is that the truth was buried, not by snow, but by the Soviet government itself. Just weeks after the hikers' bodies were recovered, authorities abruptly closed the investigation, citing the cause of death as an unknown compelling force. That vague phrase only deepened the mystery. For decades, the official case files were classified and details were scarce. Even the families of the victims were kept in the dark. Many of them believed the government knew far more than it let on, especially with the presence of unexplained radiation on some of the hikers' clothing and the rapid silence imposed on the press. Rescue team members and investigators were reportedly told not to speak of what they had seen. It wasn't until the 2019 reinvestigation, over 60 years later, that Russian officials revisited the case. But even then, they offered no dramatic revelations. The official conclusion? A slab avalanche, a variation of the original avalanche theory, was to blame. But many weren't convinced. The new findings still couldn't explain the missing eyes, tongue, and massive internal trauma. And for those who had waited decades for the truth, it felt like yet another state-approved version of events, carefully controlled and deliberately incomplete. To this day, many believe that what really happened on that mountain was never meant to be known. In recent years, modern science has attempted to shed new light on the Dyatlov Pass mystery. One notable effort came in 2021, when a team of Swiss scientists used advanced avalanche simulations, including software developed for Pixar animation, to test the slab avalanche theory. Their findings suggested that under certain conditions, a block of snow could have slid down and caused the type of injuries found on the bodies, without completely burying the tent. It was a compelling update, backed by data and peer-reviewed models. But even this refined theory leaves critical questions unanswered. It doesn't account for the slashed tent, the missing eyes and tongue,